What's up, friends? Welcome into another episode of Tables, Tailgates, and Top Loaders. This is the special Week 10 game preview. We are going to talk about Bills and Dolphins. I am your host, TB. Thanks for checking out the 3Ts podcast. So much to get to in this game preview. But before we dive right into the news and notes, I do want to start by talking about the trade deadline, because the trade deadline came and went on Tuesday at 4 for the Buffalo Bills. Now, I actually recorded an emergency podcast on this new kind of travel mic system thing I bought for my phone, and I'm clearly still working out the kinks because by the time I inputted it into my audio editor, it was absolute trash. And so that's exactly where it went, the trash. So I'm going to give you kind of a shorter, abridged, maybe less ranty version of what I kind of was talking about in that emergency pod. But one thought I was hearing was regarding the competition in the AFC for the Buffalo Bills. And the thought was that most teams stood pat in the conference. The Ravens made a few smaller deals, and if you haven't checked, the Colts made an absolute blockbuster, which we'll get to. But other than that, you have the Patriots, you have the Chiefs, the Steelers, the Broncos, the Chargers. All of them really didn't do anything. They kind of did Zippo. So the thought was, hey, the competition didn't move, so we're good. We shouldn't worry about not making a move. Well, I'm sorry, I don't agree with that at all. In fact, I totally disagree that was the right strategy. I think this was the time to kind of jump and to separate ourselves from the rest of the pack. Distance yourself more this year than ever before and go get the Lombardi. Like, go get it. Do all you can. Push your chips in. Like, this is a year that we were supposed to go get that number one seed, because if you think back, what was the one thing we've been missing the last 4 playoff runs was that number one seed. We had an easy schedule. It was kind of all laid out for us. And the one thing that we've missed, like I said, the last 4 years is that number one seed. So to sit back and do nothing and to not get further ahead of that competition, I really think it was a huge a huge miss. And now as a result, I think it makes the Buffalo Bills margin for error so much smaller, because God forbid we suffer more injuries or significant injuries. I think we are in big trouble. So let's talk about Kincaid. If he re-aggravates his oblique, or God forbid Shakir goes down, I think the offense is toast. I've discussed the offensive triangle, and it made me think of, if y'all remember the Jordan teams, the Bulls, Chicago Bulls teams of the 90s, they ran an offense called the triangle offense. And I kind of think, well, obviously it doesn't necessarily, it's not a one-for-one translation, but the Bills run a triangle offense with Josh Allen, James Cook, and Dalton Kincaid. These are the 3 that make the offense go. They simply make it move, and if one of those pieces is gone, then it doesn't work so smoothly. So we've seen what happens when Kincaid is out of the lineup for weeks at a time. It's not smooth, it's not efficient, and nothing seems to work right. So yeah, I do look at those 3 as the key components. And if he re-aggravates that oblique, because we know historically, I know he's only been in the league a couple of years, but he has an injury history already. So we didn't do anything to ensure help if one of those guys goes down. But the way I look at this, it seems like Brandon Beane is treating returning injured players as trade deadline acquisitions. Now, I know he had a press conference, and we'll get to that in a minute, but I kind of think that this is a big mistake. I think he's looking at Josh Palmer. I think he's looking at Gabe Davis, Daquan Jones as reinforcements to the wide receiver room and to the defensive line. So people assumed that we were going to pivot with the trade focus after losing Hoyt and Ed Oliver. People assumed we were going to pivot and go get D-line help at the deadline, which I would have been completely fine with. I would have understood the move. I would have been fine with. But instead, we get nothing, zip. Then people looked at the Falcons and the Patriot game, and everyone on the earth, everyone on the planet, everyone who follows the NFL, specifically the Buffalo Bills, everyone was screaming that we needed wide receiver reinforcements. And everyone's clamoring for a big, huge trade. I have been talking about this for weeks, a big, huge trade at wide receiver. And the rumor was that there were wide receivers available for the right price. So you had names like Chris Olave, you had Waddle from Miami, and you had Brian Thomas Jr. from the Jacksonville Jaguars. These 3 were rumored to be available, but yet, once again, we got absolutely zip. So I can only explain this in one of 2 ways. Either Brandon Beane truly believes that Palmer and Davis can be the solution and will help this wide receiver core eventually when they're healthy, when they're on the field, or he just doesn't really want to admit he was wrong in the offseason, and he doesn't really want to dive deeper into position. Now, maybe he softened, maybe he backed off this with the press conference, and if you listen to the press conference, he was adamant that he had players that he tried to trade for, and he thought he had potential deals in place. Whether they were for a wide receiver or not, we will never know. But you would like to think that that was the case, but I don't know. I really don't know. But either way, I just don't get either explanation, to be honest, because yes, I know a couple things. I know it takes two to tango. I know you need a trade partner. But as I said, these rumors are flying around that these players are available. So what does it come down to? It just comes down to cost and what Buffalo Bills and Brandon Beane are willing to pay. And this brings us to the idea of draft capital. And it seems how some teams are so reluctant to part with these draft picks. Well, to me, draft picks, let's talk about draft picks for a minute. To me, they're nothing more than lotto tickets. They are essentially scratch-offs. So despite all your research, despite having teams devoted to draft prep and so-called experts, at best, it's like flipping a coin. You got a 50-50 shot whether these players are going to pan out. And it's crazy to think about it like this. Not only that, sometimes it takes 2, 3, 4, 5 years sometimes until you really know for sure whether these draft picks are going to be successful. We don't have that long to wait. And I don't have the patience to wait for that long. So it makes no sense when you have a team that's literally knocking at the door to the Super Bowl. It makes no sense to wait years to solve a problem that you know you have right now. So as far as I'm concerned, you take all your chips, you push them in the middle of the table, and you go after it. Now let's talk about the Colts deal, because I said I wanted to talk about this. The Colts deal with the Jets. They went out, they traded for Sauce Gardner, cornerback, and they gave up a big haul. They gave up 2 first-round draft picks, and they also traded back to the Jets wide receiver Adonai Mitchell. Now, people lost their collective minds. They trashed the Colts every direction. They trashed the Colts. Oh my God, such an overpay. And the flip side to that, what did they do? They praised the Jets. They praised the Jets for selling and getting such victory as far as draft capital is concerned. But is this really how we should be looking at this deal? Because here's a team with the Colts. They're 7-2. They're sitting in first place right now in the AFC, in the whole conference. Yes, they probably have overachieved thus far this year, but as I said, they're the 1 seed, and now they're basically in control of their own destiny. Here's a team with a absolute drastic need at cornerback. They saw a player who was available, who is fantastic, by the way. They saw a huge need. They went out and they fixed it instantly. Done. Your problem is now solved. So now you get a young, awesome, contract-controlled superstar who is now penciled into your starting defense and has fixed the problem for the next, 4 years? This is not a Band-Aid, folks. This is not a short-term solution. This is a long-term gain to your defensive side of your franchise. It sounds like an awesome deal to me, so what's the problem? We want to talk about, giving you also gave him Adonai Mitchell. How many catches does he have? I looked it up. He has 9 catches on the season so far. 9? Give me a break. What are we talking about here? And the Jets, they're getting praised. They're getting praised for this move, for stockpiling draft picks. Well, now they have 1 billion picks in the next 2 years. Fantastic. That's awesome. Now you just gave away 2 huge cornerstones in Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams, who you also traded. So 2 huge pieces. Now you have to replace them with these picks. Okay, well, just what we talked about. These are lotto tickets. So let's say they want to go out and not necessarily use all these picks, but they want to compile some sort of package to go and get a franchise quarterback. Well, tell me which team out there is giving you a franchise quarterback? Is it the Ravens? Are they going to trade Lamar Jackson? Not a chance. Are the Chiefs going to take your first round picks and give you Patty Mahomes? Are the Bills going to trade you Josh Allen? There's no chance. So what now? So we've seen historically the Jets have drafted great players, and what has happened? They end up right back in this situation because they're a trash franchise that has no direction, and they end up right back here every few years selling off their great players that they can't seem to build around. And now they go draft again, or they stockpile these draft picks again, and they're setting their cycle back another 3, 4, 5 years. I mean, there's a reason. I mean, if you've hopped on social media in the last few weeks, you see these videos of these young Jets fans, like teenage boys, young kids, and they're Jets fans coming out of games, and they're like telling the camera, oh my gosh, I hate this team. And they're crying and they're like losing their minds because their team is a joke. The Jets are a laughingstock. So I don't get the praise. You're going to praise this team for trading away 2 cornerstone defensive superstars? Makes no sense. For unproven lotto tickets. Yeah, I get the rebuild, but this is all this team does year after year, decade after decade, it seems like, is hit the reset button. So we have this idea where we fall in love with draft capital. And to me, like I said, it's nothing more than lotto tickets. So you're telling me I could have gotten Jalen Waddle from the Dolphins for a first and something else? Okay, Miami, I'm listening. Tell me what that something else is, because now I'm sitting at the table waiting to see what this negotiation is going to lead to. And maybe you won't ever trade in the division. Maybe you won't trade to the Bills. Okay, no problem. But what if the same deal is on the table with the Saints and Chris Olave? What if the same deal is on the table with the Jaguars to get Brian Thomas Jr.? Now you have proven, young, fantastic wide receivers who are not just a season rental, but these players will be on your team, not just through the end of this season, but for next year as well. And in the case of Brian Thomas, another year after that. I mean, what are we talking about here? It's just like the Colts situation. Diagnose where your problems are and go fix your problem. And maybe you can even sign them to extensions. In the case of Olave, I think you have this season, next season, and then sign them to an extension. Pony up to the table, make it happen. So you're telling me I could have an offense of the triangle, obviously, but then you could have Cook, Kincaid, Shakir, and either Olave, Waddle, or Brian Thomas Jr.? Yes, please. I will stack those 4 up against any other team in the AFC. Absolutely. I would stack it up right now. So you want to talk about frustrating? That's an understatement. I was extremely, extremely frustrated Tuesday night, and I've heard the same thoughts and comments from other Bills fans, other Mafia members. So anyway, that's kind of what my thoughts were on the whole trade. It's just very frustrating, but let's get into this Week 10 game preview, and let's start with some news and notes. The power rankings. You know how I love talking about the power rankings. They are out after 9 weeks of football, and what do we have here, folks? So after beating the Kansas City Chiefs 28-21 last Sunday afternoon in Orchard Park, ESPN, of all places, shot the Bills out of a freaking cannon, and they zoomed all the way up to the rankings to the top spot. That's right, the Bills are sitting at number 1 on the ESPN NFL power rankings. I was kind of shocked when I found this out. Now, other publications, I've seen them at 2, I've seen them at 4, I've seen them as low as 5. Bottom line, like, you beat a absolutely rolling Chiefs team, and you're going to get rewarded in the power rankings. What else? We just talked about the lack of trades by the Bills, but it doesn't mean that the Bills have not been active. Hey, buckle up for your dose of excitement. Are you ready? Because guess what? Defensive tackle Fedarian Mathis has signed and was brought up from the practice squad to the active roster. We excited yet? Anyone like jumping out of their seats? I know I am, but if that doesn't get you fired up, how about signing former Bill Kingsley Jonathan, defensive end Kingsley Jonathan? Who's excited for that one? Anyone? How about defensive back Corey Couch? Well, Couch and Jonathan were both signed to the practice squad. So are we fired up yet? Does that help anyone recover from the lack of moves at the deadline? Anyone? No, I didn't think so. And so what did they do to make space on the practice squad? They cut everyone's favorite HBO Hard Knocks highlight film, Jimmy Charlo. So say goodbye to the military man. He is no longer on the practice squad. Brandon Beane, I talked about this earlier. He held a press conference Wednesday to discuss the trade deadline and the state of the team. He said some of the same things we already talked about. He said, he was disappointed. He kind of went home upset, mad as a fan, but he kind of reiterated, hey, it takes 2 to tango, and teams weren't willing to move guys. He made it seem like they had deals in place and things were ready to move to free up cap space, had certain things fallen into place, but at the end of the day, he made a comment that he kept talking about how this isn't fantasy football. I know a lot of people aren't bothered by this. I don't know. I don't love it when the GM comes out and tells the general public that it's not fantasy football. Because to me, that's kind of like condescending, and it's almost like he's talking down to us, like, well, you don't know how hard this job is. And yeah, I get it. I understand. No one has ever said that this is fantasy football. I understand that there's roster construction and salary and the cap and all this stuff and long-term ramifications. I get it, but You don't need to tell me that this isn't fantasy football, because comments like that just make me kind of annoyed. Anyway, he goes on to say the trade deadline is hard, and what's the fit? Where's the mental capacity of the player? How are they going to be involved in the team? And it's just like, does GM speak? And yeah, I get it. I listened to it a couple times, and the first time I kind of got annoyed, and the second time I kind of calmed down a little bit, but I just get kind of tired of the GM speak, and it seems like there's this condescending attitude towards the commoners, if you will. And I understand that we don't know all the ins and outs of running a franchise. Trust me. This idea that what's the fit and what's their mental capacity, these are professional athletes. So tell me how Olave or Waddle or Brian Thomas, who are some of the best receivers in the league, tell me how that they would struggle mentally to fit in with Josh Allen. I don't buy that for a second. But anyway, let's move on. The Dolphins. Here's a team on the opposite end of the spectrum. They recently fired their general manager. They have already moved on, traded pass rusher Jalen Phillips to the Eagles for a third-round pick. And you want to talk about active general managers? Well, here's the Eagles yet again proving year after year that a couple things. Deals can be made regardless of the cap. So we want to talk about cap implications. It seems like this guy, Howie Roseman, the GM of the Eagles, it's almost like they don't even have a cap, because he's making moves like this year after year. Just seems like he has literally stockpiling talent on a roster that is already loaded. I mean, they just won the Super Bowl, for God's sakes, and he's out there going out and just getting more talent, especially on the defensive side, to just be dominating on that side of the ball. And it kind of makes me want to be sick. So it can be done. I don't want to hear it can't be done. And they got Jalen for a third-round pick. Big whoop. Like, I would do that deal in a heartbeat. Anyway, back to this game. This is a big game for the Bills. We need to keep the positive production on the field anyway, because we know nobody's too happy about the off-field positive production, but we need to keep the on-field production moving in the right direction. We need to get down to Miami. We need to take over Hard Rock Stadium. I think it's going to be rocking with Bills fans. You know, they're very fair weather fans down in Miami. Once the Dolphins are pretty much out of it, which was week 4, week 5, they are pretty quick to sell their tickets. And so I think we need to get down there, take over the stadium, take advantage of this Dolphin team that appears to kind of be in a bit of disarray coming off the heels of a 28-6 defeat at the hands of the Baltimore Ravens. So injuries, let's switch our attention to injuries for the Buffalo Bills. There's kind of a lot going on. I don't really want to overreact on a Thursday, but it seems like this list is kind of growing, and it's a little bit scary. So Christian Benford today did not practice. He was limited on Wednesday. Now today did not practice. He's got a groin injury. This isn't good. I think if he's a DNP today, I'm not sure that they're going to risk it and put him in the lineup against their one offensive pass catcher in Waddle. So it would not shock me at all if he misses this game. Joshua Palmer, hey, stop me if you've heard this before. Joshua Palmer has a limited participation in practice. Not sure what his availability will be for Sunday. Joey Bosa, he's dealing with a wrist injury. Now, I was at the game and I kept keying in on Bosa, and he kept shaking his arm out, so this does not surprise me at all. Yesterday, he did not practice. On Wednesday. Today, Thursday, he is limited. We shall see what happens. Hopefully, he's moving in the right direction. James Cook, also Wednesday, he did not practice, but today he was out there in a limited capacity. He was on some TV show, some NFL show. I can't remember who he was on, but he assured that he would be good to go for Sunday. AJ Epinesa, now this one is a little scary because he has not practiced all week because of the concussion, and this is he's got to go through the mandatory protocol to be cleared for the game. It wouldn't shock me if he also does not play. Taron Johnson, he was limited today after not practicing yesterday. He's got a groin injury as well. Daquan Jones, now he did not practice Wednesday, but Thursday he was in a limited capacity. Hopefully he is moving in the right direction, dealing with that calf issue. And Shaq Thompson dealing with the hamstring. So yeah, that's a lot going on. A lot going on. It would not shock me if a lot of these players are just completely inactive and they don't risk it. But hey, there's like I just got done saying after the trade deadline, there is no room for error. So you can't sit all these guys. So it'll be interesting to see who is ready to roll on Sunday afternoon. For the Dolphins, Russell Douglas, he did not practice. They have Chop Robertson. Those are probably the two big names on the defensive side of the ball. Chop Robertson, he's also in the concussion protocol, and Russell Douglas is dealing with an ankle foot injury. Bradley Chubb, he has been limited in practice this week. He's got a foot injury going on, and that about covers their big main players. So let's talk themes, some storylines heading into the game. Can the Bills offense, can they keep it rolling in Miami against the Dolphins? The passing game got back on track against Kansas City and the Chiefs and saw Josh Allen set a franchise record for a new high completion percentage in the game. And he had 88.5% completion percentage, which is kind of crazy. He threw for 273 yards, and frankly, he was damn near perfect. And the one ball, Jackson Hawes, we talked about it at the last podcast. Jackson Hawes, he should have caught it, but he threw it so freaking hard it almost took his head off. But the offense needs to keep rolling. If Palmer is ready to go, I say we try to slowly incorporate him back in the mix, get him some playing time if he's good. But as we talked about with the injuries, he's still in a limited capacity. And then the red flag is the Cook ankle injury. It's one of these things. Do we risk having that ankle aggravated or re-aggravated in a game that we should hopefully be able to win? But I don't know. These Dolphins can be pesky, and it seems like they stick around way too long when we play them. But it's definitely something to focus on as we get closer to the game. I say you play him if he's available, you get out to a lead, and then you sit everybody and get the key players off the field. So, because we're going to need him probably more than anyone else down the stretch outside of Josh Allen. What else? The Bills have owned the Dolphins over the last few years. They are looking for their 8th straight big dub over this team. You've probably seen the memes. You've probably seen the shirts. It's one of my favorites. It shows Josh Allen cradling like a baby dolphin, and he's feeding it with a baby bottle. I love that picture. We need to see Allen continue to dominate the Dolphins and keep that train rolling. Let's get dub 8 straight over this team. That would be great. The Dolphins are coming into this game. They have a little extra rest, kind of a mini baked in bye. They played last on the Thursday night game against the Ravens, and they got smoked. We already talked about it, 28-6. This gives them a huge rest advantage, but hopefully it doesn't really hurt the Bills' chances of winning this game. Coach Mike McDaniel, I love listening to his press conferences, or at least trying to catch some of the sound bites. He was asked, if you all haven't seen this is pretty funny. He was asked Wednesday why they keep losing to the Bills, and he provided this fan-freaking-tastic answer. Quote, "They've beaten us because they've scored more points and done the right football things longer than we have in those games." That's what he said. They've beaten us because they've scored more points and they've done more football things right. So I love his sound bites. He's to the point now where he just seems like he doesn't give a crap about anything. You got to respect him for coming out and just giving you these golden nuggets, and his willingness to provide epic sound bites to the media. It's just fantastic. I really hope he does not get fired this offseason, because I want to see this train wreck continue forever. All right, let's move and turn our attention to X factors to the game. Let's start with the defense. D-line, once again, in the middle of this line. This is scary because they need to step up and cover these injuries. Hoyt, Oliver, Daquan Jones, maybe he can come back, maybe not. But the Dolphins' strength is running A-Chain. A-Chain is a beast, and if he gets going, specifically, he can carve it up right in the middle of the D-line. So it's time to go. Next man up kind of mentality. We need to get after it. He can be extremely dangerous if he gets going early, so we need to look to keep him in check. And what else? We have to contain their only passing threat, which is Waddle. Outside of him and A-Chain, there's nothing that scares me on this offense. Lock him down just like we locked down Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice last week, and we should be good because, in my opinion, Tua does not have the ability to take over a game. Slow down these two weapons, and frankly, it should be over. Offensively, someone else outside of Kincaid, James Cook, Khalil Shakir, someone else outside of these guys needs to step up. I'm looking for anybody else on this roster, on this offense, specifically in the wide receiver room, anybody else. We need to establish some other threat. Somebody else has to be ready to go. And I'm not just talking about a random catch here and there, but because I know a ton of people caught one ball last week, but I'm talking about someone that the defense actually needs to start worrying about, focusing on. Is it Josh Palmer? Can he get on the field? Can Curtis Samuel contribute literally anything to this team at all in the last few years? I mean, come on, let's go. You see the meme of the guy, the hand-drawn character, and he's like poking the stick at something, trying to get it to move and wake up. It's time for someone else in this wide receiver room to move. It's time to go. Let's go. What else? Special teams. Coverage unit, you need to button it up. Last week, I was not impressed watching the Chiefs start nearly every drive around the 40, 45-yard line. We got to tighten this up. Matt Prater, time to bounce back. No more bouncing stuff off the goalpost when we can put the game away. Get a bunch to go through the uprights this week. Calm everyone's fears. Nobody wants to see a kicker controversy between you and Tyler Bass. We don't want that. We don't need that right now. We need stability with our special teams, and y'all got to go and show up on Sunday. All right, let's move on to the stress meter. After last week's stress meter, I think it broke new heights with the Chiefs game. Well, this week I am operating at a much lower level, thank goodness. Yeah, some of these injuries scare me, but I think that even if we play it safe with most of these guys, I think we should be okay. I'm not very stressed this week. Got to be honest with you, Mafia. I'm not that stressed, and kind of happy that I'm not, because after last week, I needed a break. And so I will tell you that the stress meter is rocking right around 3.5. So we're not even halfway stressed. So I'm nice and cool. I'm nice and calm. I like it that way. I prefer these less stress, low stress games. Anyway, prediction time. Here we go. Bills are favored on the road by 9 points in Miami at Hard Rock Stadium. It's going to be sunny on Sunday afternoon. The Bills will be rocking the blue jersey up top, white pants, white helmet. Weather, well, it's Miami. It's November. It'll be almost perfect. 85, which might be a little hot on the field for them, but nothing like playing down there in September, so they should be just fine. I'm not going to waste any time on this and overthink it. I think the Bills will win. I think they cover the 9 points. I have them winning this game 31-18. I think they're going to move on to 7-2. They're going to come home to Orchard Park, and they're going to get ready for a big matchup against Baker touchdown maker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Bucks. So there you have it, folks. Thanks for tuning in to the 3 T's and this special Week 10 game preview. I hope everyone enjoys the game on Sunday. I'm excited for the 1 o'clock kickoff, but I appreciate everyone stopping in and checking out the pod. If you could help me out and refer this to another Mafia member, hit that like, hit that follow, hit that subscribe. And as always, I appreciate you all very, very much. So until next time, whether it's ripping packs, breaking tables, or dropping elbows, keep doing what you love. And as always, go Bills.